Hi, my name is Jason Arbin, and I'm a test nerd. So what do test nerds want? Well, they want to use AI, but a lot of them think it's difficult or take a lot of time or a lot of money. And those are totally not the case to get super productive today, like in 15 minutes from now, using AI for software testing. So I put together this quick start guide because a lot of people keep asking me, and I've done a poor job of just communicating things and putting it all in one spot. So there's no excuses anymore. So let's look at this a little bit. So a couple notes. If you're concerned about privacy and security around using AI for software testing, you're not alone. It's like the biggest concern and angst people have. It's by far the most popular, frequent one. You can also run it from your laptop, from your home computer network, or at Starbucks, and still get some stuff done without even violating your company's security, privacy, and policies. But it's legit. If you're concerned about it, you should follow through, and we'll talk about it later. We're lucky that these things are free now. The AIs are kind of free. The basic versions are free now. The basic versions that we have available now were like the best versions just 6 months ago. So it's not that big of a deal anymore to use the free version. But really, if you're thinking $30 a month, is a big barrier, I'm not sure what to tell you, but there's ways to use it free. And not just a commercially supported version that's free, but a private, local, even open source one that's free. But really, you should probably spring for the $30. If your career and being more efficient is not worth $30, then you won't have much to say. I would even argue, even up to 6 months ago, it was still experimental. Like whether these things are going to be useful or not, the AI was still getting smarter. Tooling and infrastructure is getting smarter. People are still figuring out how to prompt, how to use these things for productive work, especially in software testing. And a lot of people have angst around software testing because they want to be very reliable. They're used to things being very predictable. Now's the right time. If you start in 3 or 6 months, you're starting too late. Right now is probably the optimal time because the technology is caught up. We know how to use it. People are kind of getting comfortable with it. Now's the time. But if you wait, you're going to be a laggard and a late adopter, and that's not going to be best plan for your future. Don't waste your time. There's a lot of tutorials online. There's a lot of workshops and people are selling books. All those things are getting outdated almost as quickly as they're created. Secondly, you don't need a bunch of training. You don't need a bunch of fancy prompt engineering. There's been scare tactics to encourage people to learn by paying for classes how to do prompt engineering. The reality is it's not that difficult. And the AIs are even starting to fix the prompts themselves behind the scenes. So even if you're a bad prompter, it gets fixed up behind the scenes for you anyway. The AIs are getting smarter. When you're using AI and LMs specifically for software testing, number one, context. So context is super important. What I mean by context is if you just ask it, create test cases for my website. Well, what website, right? But you can share all sorts of information with it that you have. Why are you good at writing test cases or your team? It's because they have context. They have the specifications or they can see it. The AI through text can't even see the page, or they have access to test cases, test plans, all these different types of artifacts. And a lot of testers will use the AI quickly and go, the AI is not very smart. And by the way, it doesn't know all these things. The cool thing is today, it wasn't true 6 months ago, is you can upload all that data to it. So you can just upload your PRDs, your specifications, your test plans, screenshots of your application, any BDD artifacts, Gherkin that you have, our Cucumber stuff, upload all that stuff, and then ask it questions and ask it to do things. It will be just like a really smart person in your team that has all that context. So that's something super important to think about is make sure the AI has the same context that you do so that it's useful. Secondly, it's a chat bot. Most testers, when they use software, they do BVTs. They do little tiny tests or acceptance tests, right? They ask a little tiny thing, do a little tiny test, and if that fails, they stop. It's the worst model for using AI. You should do the opposite. You should actually start with really complex questions and really difficult questions. Because if you ask a simple question, you'll get a simple answer. You may be underwhelmed, and it won't be that great and useful. More importantly, it has a conversation with you. So don't just ask one question or do like one test of it. Engage with it. If it doesn't give you enough results, like say, generate test cases and it generates 5. You go, well, that's not a lot. Just say, hey, that's not enough. Or, hey, can you generate more? And guess what it will do? It will generate more. And then if you say, why did you create that test case? It will tell you why I did it. So have a conversation with it just like you would a teammate. It's not a search engine, right? A lot of people treat it as like a search engine. It's not. It's a conversation with an entity, and you can keep asking why all the way down. Testers are also worried about truthiness and accuracy. These are blockers for testers. These are issues that stop them from using AI. Early fear mongering has been mitigated by about hallucinations because the AIs are just that much better now. They just don't hallucinate as much. If you ask it a crazy question, it can give you a crazy answer sometimes, but so can people. In terms of accuracy, if you're asking it questions, if you give it the right context, was pretty accurate. It's usually correct. You should always review the output. You plus AI will be a lot faster, even if you have to double check things. That's what a manager does. You ask for a task to get done, you look at it, you review it, you judge it, you maybe provide corrective feedback to the person. AI is the same way. Speed and cost efficiency. So a lot of people think that AI takes a long time to set up or get ready. You have to have a bunch of data. You don't have to have any data with today's AI. If you have extra data in context, that's great, but you don't have to have it for most testing activities. In many measures, it's even more than 100 times faster and 100 times less expensive, border on free. So theoretically, it could be infinitely more cost effective than a human. So it's many times faster and many times more efficient. If you're not using it and your neighbor is, or the next candidate is, they'll blow your socks off. So you basically have to use this stuff to just be competitive, frankly, these days. A lot of testers think they know everything. I might have been guilty of that at one point in my life, but the AI is smarter than us. I've been able to admit that it's smarter than me. It'll probably take you a while to get to that same point. A lot of people say treat it like an intern. I think the complete opposite. You give the intern simple problems and simple tasks. I think you should give it some of your most difficult questions and tasks, but work with it to solve the answer. It's almost like you have a PhD student on loan in the area that you're interacting with it. So think about interacting with today as if it was a PhD student that was really experienced and smart in that vertical area. So, and we'll stop. Moment for advertisement is just use Checky.ai. If you don't even want to learn all this stuff, just use Checky.ai. If you just enter your URL and your email address, you can get free test results from AI testing agents. I've made it embarrassingly easy. I've tried to make it as easy as possible. You can sign up for a demo too for free. So anyway, if you're not willing to do that much work, then you're probably not ready to deal with AI. But on to the non-commercial side of things. So first of all, you have to pick a chatbot, right? Everyone has heard about ChatGPT. That's like the default industry standard today from OpenAI. But there's a lot of other ones you can use now that are equally inexpensive or free and equally as intelligent. So Claude is one. I use that a lot for my coding work lately. There's Copilot, it just comes on Windows and with Bing and with Visual Studio and GitHub. That's a good chatbot to work with, particularly for technical things. And also Google Gemini. There's other ones too, but Google's Gemini is also interesting. They seem to be very focused on making sure math is, even complex math is done correctly and high-level reasoning is happening. Every week, literally in the last week, Google and OpenAI have leapfrogged each other twice, I think, with new builds in terms of which is officially smarter than the other one. Just pick one. They're all kind of equally smart. And frankly, you don't need to have 190 IQ to do most software testing tasks. So at some point, there's super diminishing returns on the increased IQ. How much IQ do you need to use to write test cases to test a login box? Right? Even if you get around 130 IQ, your creativity almost can work against you. So I wouldn't worry about that. Just pick one and go with it. Most of them have free plans, or you at least have to sign in with an account. Generating bugs. This is super important. So what are testers supposed to do? However they do it, they're supposed to say, hey, it works right, or there's a bug, right? It's super easy. Whatever you're working on, just take a picture of it, take a screenshot. You could even take a picture with your phone if you wanted, but just take a picture of it. You could also gather text documents, requirements, or whatever, any artifacts you want. But just take a screenshot of it, then go to your AI and upload it as an attachment and simply say, check this screenshot for any bugs. If there are any, please list them. And if not, don't list any. Something to that effect. There's some interesting aspects of this particular prompt we'll talk about in a second. But that's all you have to do. Take a picture and upload it. It's the easiest possible thing in the world. I created this little temporary page with cursor and then added some bugs. As a human, you may notice them. I just asked it for any bugs. And guess what it says? Well, we'll get to that in a second. Always give it the option to return nothing. One of the biggest problems in testing when the AI actually hallucinates, it's that people say, is it A or B? If it's actually neither, it will say the wrong thing because it's trying to make you happy, trying to please the asker and answer their question. And if there's no answer or you don't give it the option for the correct answer, it will sometimes answer incorrectly. It really, really wants to make you happy, almost a higher priority than truthiness. So just give it the option to say, hey, if you don't find any, it's all good. And if it doesn't find any, it will tell you. But in this case, it found a few bugs. It found a typo in the button text because there's some extra H's. It also found an extra H below the button, and it even knows what it should probably say. You didn't give it a specification. You didn't tell it what it's supposed to look like. It can actually reason enough to look at the web page and figure out how it should not only identify the bugs, but what it probably should look like. And it talks about how that causes misalignment. And there's also, accidentally, I didn't introduce this bug on purpose, but the fonts aren't consistent between the buttons and whatever, and the footer at the bottom. I'm not someone that actually notices font things. That's not my thing. That's not my groove. It can make the site look unprofessional. Take your website, whatever you're testing, whatever you work on at work, and we'll talk privacy and security later. Give it to ChatGPT and say, are there any issues with this? Any bugs? And you might get free bugs out of it. And it found them in this quick one here. Realized those bugs were free and took seconds, almost no effort of human effort, and just seconds of a computer time. So we're entering a new world. If you just take a screenshot where you're working on, upload it, ask that question, you can officially say you've used AI in software testing. Even if it didn't find a bug, it's great to know that there's no bugs you missed. It's great to see that there's another person, entity, the AI, that also looked at that page and didn't see any issues. We used a simple example, but when you go to more complex sites, it finds lots of issues. You'll be surprised. But we've just used AI to find bugs. Super easy. What about test cases? We software testing humans like test cases. Let's take a screenshot, or we could give it documentation, requirements, specifications, or whatever. We're going to upload whatever artifact it is that we want. And in this case, we're just giving a screenshot of Google. And then guess what we do? It gets really complicated here. We upload the screenshot and we say something like, these generate test cases, right? And guess what it does? It generates some test cases, generates 60 different test cases in just seconds. And for literally free, it can generate test cases. Now, an experienced tester will look at this and go, okay, whatever. One or two of these things you didn't think of. If you really are honest with yourself, and you're testing yourself and testing AI, look at the page yourself, come up with a list of test cases for it, and then see what the AI says. Usually the AI will come up with something that's useful and interesting that you didn't think of. But even then, you might go, wow, wait a minute. These are like just happy path things. These aren't very interesting test cases. Okay. And by the way, if you spend a year testing something, maybe the AI didn't find anything you didn't think about from a test cases perspective. But guess what you can do? You can say, hey, create test cases that are likely to cause bugs, like to find bugs, like not just happy path, but things that are bug hunting kind of test cases. Guess what it does? It comes up with some, right? So that's kind of interesting, like, because it was dark mode is turned on by default. And notice that. I didn't tell it that. And it wants to make sure that over reloads and different tabs and machines for that user account, that it stays in dark mode. So that's interesting testing. It also talks about long queries and also interaction during page load. This is probably one most testers didn't think of. If you did, you're very likely deceiving yourself, particularly when the page takes a long time to load. There'll be more time to interact with the page before it's finished that might cause problems or bugs. And I even asked it to say why testers might miss it. It says edge cases during loading are often neglected. Like it knows this. It's read the entire internet. It's read a lot of test plans, a lot of books on testing. And it knows this is often the case. It's probably processed most open source bug databases. So it knows this is something that happens. And you probably haven't read those bug databases. You may not have thought about this. You may not even know, some testers may not know technically how the page loads. So they don't know that that's a vulnerable time for interacting with the site. But then again, testers may go, hey, those are very high level. They're not super detailed. And maybe I want more details. This again demonstrates what we said earlier, where they're chatbots. You should have a conversation. If you just ask a little question and leave, kind of like use a search engine, you're using it wrong, completely wrong. Most demonstrations by testers online and that talk about how AI is not very bright and not very useful or dangerous, they don't chat with it. Like it's called a chat bot, and they don't chat with it. Or if they chat with it, they're just trying to push it to some extreme, a mental extreme to prove they can drive something crazy. But if you're trying to be useful and functional and productive, these things are amazingly useful. So I came up with some more examples of different types of things to specifically do. It knows what types of issues are probably happening behind the scenes, the technology, like how it loads up, what things are loaded in different orders, and when the DOM is done or not done, rendering timings. And it knows the structure of a lot of web pages and HTML and script on pages. It takes all that kind of context and intuits what might be interesting to test. Remember, we only gave it a screenshot. We didn't give it the code, the HTML, didn't tell it what server it's running on, but it kind of knows and intuits like a great tester where the app might be vulnerable. Okay, the AI can do all that, but I'm still not super impressed. If you're not very impressed, this is amazing. I'm sorry, but it is impressive. Again, it's 100x faster and 100x less expensive. And in my experience, it actually is better than me if I chat with it and give it the chance. I'm skeptical. How could I possibly execute these test cases? Because Google loads so fast. The web page loads so fast that I can't even do these interactions. You're right. But it tells you you can use tools and different techniques to slow the page down, the page download speed and rendering timing, so that you can actually execute these tricks and these inputs and test cases. In fact, the funny thing is it almost assumes that you would have known these things, but you had to ask because it knew that these are interesting tests and they're executable. One is the slow network conditions. And interestingly, it's not just so that you can try to find a gotcha in the Google homepage loading. It's that's the experience of users that are on an edge network or a very busy machine or just, the network's slow in general. Users will actually experience that. And the funny thing is, if the Google page is slow to load, guess what users will probably start doing? Interacting with it early. So it is in its most vulnerable time and condition. So we can keep going all the way down. Ask it, why did you think that? How do I do that? What else should I do? What am I not thinking of? And it is the most interesting tester I've ever run into. But you have to have a conversation with it. Again, here we've used AI to generate test cases, and probably more sophisticated test cases than the 95% of test teams and testers in the world would have created. And we've done it in just a couple minutes with a couple prompts and for free. So congratulations. Now you can generate test cases with AI. Let's talk about test automation. How do we use AI to generate it? This is a large topic, but a lot of test automation engineers are very skeptical of AI, partly because they think code has to be perfect and they think their code is perfect, but we won't tell them the truth. And they think it has to be super predictable and it has to have all this context, because that's what we pride ourselves on as humans, is understanding all these things. You have to understand the test, the case, the business, the code, the product, to get the automation running. And it's difficult for people. It genuinely is for humans, and very expensive for humans to do. A lot of us don't want the AI to actually be able to do it. Just like we saw in other examples, testers will often start with simple tests first, simple cases. And if those don't work, they immediately throw it out because they're biased to not want it to work. That's typical testing. You try a little thing. If that doesn't work, you give up on it and you move on to other things while you wait for a new build or a new version. These are chatbots. You have to iterate with them and give them context. Like we said earlier, you have to share as much context with them as possible. If the AI doesn't know what to do, or doesn't know about your page object model, we'll get to that, or, something specific about your web page or the DOM, it's because you didn't tell it. The funny thing is, you probably wouldn't have figured it out either if you didn't have that document or that view source on the page. So let's do some quick code generation. We won't even give it a picture of the page because it knows what the Google homepage looks like. So we'll say, generate some test automation code. And guess what it did? First thing it did, it said, we can use Python and Selenium. We could have said use Java and Selenium, or Python and Playwright, for example, but we didn't tell it, so it guessed. A human tester would generally make a lot of assumptions when you have conversations. There's a lot of implicit knowledge sharing and assumptions. And that's what the AI is actually pretty good at. So it picked those two. My code's Java. The dumb computer, it picked Python. Well, we didn't tell it. Python's the more popular and modern language. And it's probably noticed that when in doubt, people, even maybe the people using AI and specifically, are probably using Python when they use Selenium. So net, it made some decisions because we didn't tell it. We could have told it, well, it built a hello world that loads the web, loads google.com, finds a search box, enters a search query called Selenium Test Automation, and executes it. How did it know how to find the search box? The selector thing here, right? It searched by name by Q, by the letter Q. How did it know that? A lot of ways. You don't ever really know. Even if you ask it, it may tell you a reason that may be one of 50 reasons. It's probably seen other demo code for Python and Selenium that tests a search on google.com. It also has probably seen the source code for google.com. And it might also just guess that that's likely because there's a search box. A lot of times developers call them Q because it's a query. So you don't really know why, but there's a lot more thinking than you realize, and tries to give you a succinct answer, right? This is not the richest, most elaborate code in the world. There's not like any real validation here, but it just did what we asked it to do, which was execute a search. The AI tries to be very succinct and give you the shortest possible but complete answer. So if you're missing something, just ask it for more. Interestingly, it also writes this code 100 times faster than a human, which is pretty amazing. And this is free, so it's infinitely less expensive. There's no try-catch logic in here. If it breaks badly. Like there's a try finally, but only on the outside. And there's no any backup kind of handling. It said, hey, by the way, this is how you set up WebDriver if you don't know, and how to personalize the query. So it tells you if its assumptions, it tells you how to execute locally. You can ask more and follow up for more. Test engineers, automation engineers will say, oh, but I've got all these custom page object models and all this cool complex code that I spent 2 years writing and all these classes. The AI doesn't know about that. The AI doesn't know because you didn't share it. Followed up with this thread is, hey, I've got a page object model. For the record, I stole this from Lambda Test has a page with an example page object model for searching or loading the Google homepage. I gave the PI file to it. I said, please leverage the page object model. Okay, that's pretty complicated and difficult. Within seconds, I didn't have to go read it and think about it and get it over coffee. It immediately incorporates that. It shows you, rewrites it and says, import that. But first it modified the page object model to make it a little smarter. And then it says, here's how you incorporate it. But you might say only the human tester has the specifications or knows requirements. Every time you say the AI doesn't know something, or it's because you're not sharing it with the AI. So now you can just simply upload the specifications, mock-ups, design diagrams, requirements documents, business plan, whatever you want. And then when you ask it to write tests, it will take all that into consideration when it writes the test cases. And then you can, hey, what tests am I missing? And it will tell you things that you're missing. And you can say, can you add tests for those? And it just adds them. AI can be really great at taking that context because you can read all those documents at once, where you may not only be able to think of one or two at a time. You can put in like 20 documents and it will leverage all those in figuring out what's missing, how to write the tests, and even what the validations to use. At this point, it's good to note again that the easiest way to do it is just go to checky.ai. All you have to do is put in your name, your email, your name, and the URL to your website, and you get free test results. It's automated too. You don't have to write all the Selenium. You don't have to go through all this work. You can just say, here's my URL, test it for me, and checky.ai will do that. So let's talk about test planning. So how do you get started using AI to do test planning? Take a screenshot and then upload it and just prompt it. Say, can you create a test plan or test strategy for this app? In this case, we asked it to create a test strategy. And what does it do? It creates a test strategy document. It's kind of cool. It even knows what's in scope and what's out of scope. You could change those. Like, I want you to include thinking about third-party integrations or something like that. And it goes on and on and on and on with the whole test plan. So that's super useful because you can compare it with your test plan and see what's missing, right? See what the AI thought that you didn't think, even if you already have a test plan or test strategy document. You can also ask the AI to give more details on any subsection in here, right? Of your test plan or of the test plan that it created. So even though the responses are relatively short, the trick is you just say, elaborate on section 1 or section 2, and then it expands that out, and you can keep going and going and going until you have a 150 page test plan. Can you elaborate on UI and UX testing? And it goes, sure. And it goes, da, 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 da. So it takes one line, one little section, and turns it into 15, right? With specific test cases, more and more specific test cases. And you can go deeper and deeper on any subsection, and you get more and more test planning and coverage. Ultimately, the AI can create a test plan for you. And even if you have one, you can compare it with yours, or also just upload your test plan and say, hey, look at mine, figure out what I missed in your prompts. And here's the page, a picture of the app, or here's the specification, upload the specification from the PM or whatever into there. By the way, you can even put in some of the code from the dev, copy paste all that stuff up into the prompt and say, hey, build a test plan, make a better one. And it will put all this stuff together and think through all those things concurrently in just seconds and build a more comprehensive test plan. So some testers, which surprises me, but it's very common, they won't start testing, particularly people that work at vendors, but they won't start testing or don't know how to start testing unless they have a specification or requirements doc. They need to be told, these are the things it's supposed to do, and only basically when I test these things kind of help scope the testing. But I want a specification of how it's supposed to behave or into a requirements doc. If you don't have one, a lot of times people are just stuck. Or even interestingly, if you need one, but you you're waiting on it from a customer or from from your dev team or PM, even if you're waiting, you can still tell it what it's kind of be like, and it will guess as to what the specification could be. So you can start testing planning and stuff on a lot of the obvious things the specification will have in it without having to wait for it. We just take a picture of whatever the application is, and we can say, create a product requirements doc. That's it. And guess what it does? It creates one. It's pretty cool. And it will go through all the functionality that's on there and visual design issues and probably even security and accessibility requirements and all these things. So if you're missing a PRD or a specification, or you want one for a page, even if you're a PM and you don't want to write the whole thing up, if you want it to elaborate, like the section on logo is like too small and you want more details, just ask the AI, say, flesh out the logo area with more details and detailed specifications and requirements, and it will do that. It's pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about privacy and security when it comes to testers using AI and LLMs. This is a blocker for a lot of testers because a lot of testers worry. I guess is the best way to put it. They worry, and they should. That's kind of their job and role, generally speaking. But there's been some early accidental leaks with some of the early LLMs where user input got trained into the model. That doesn't happen, generally speaking, anymore. But you should not avoid LLMs and AI because of privacy and security reasons. I think most people that are worried about that are making excuses because they'd rather not have to deal with it yet. If that's you, probably click next and maybe we'll never see each other again. I don't know. But don't let it stop you or slow you down. There's a lot of ways to deal with it today. Like their own prompts or PII or users' data in PII being leaked, not just secret plans or designs for new products. And there's regulations, medical, government. A lot of these places have regulations on how you can and use data and how you need to protect it. So you do need to be careful, and you should be careful. One option is to trust the AI companies. If it's something secret or important, I wouldn't because of track record, and there's even the chance that they get hacked or something in the cloud. But you can trust the AI providers in the cloud if you want. And for basic stuff, if you want to practice testing, like, on the Google homepage or something, all public data, it's totally fine. You shouldn't even be blocked, definitely not be blocked on practicing at all. But you can trust them mostly now. If you read the privacy and security policy of most of these AI providers in the cloud, they make you opt in or out depending on the company, but you can flip a switch so that it doesn't use your data. Generally speaking, if you pay them, they won't use your training data, but you should check that and they update it every so often. Also, if you're a criminal or you have highly sensitive data, I would not trust the cloud, just in general, let alone with AI models. And partly because the government also has retention policies. So I think it's like 90 days-ish that the federal government requires that cloud providers keep data around in case they need to prosecute you or do an investigation. So the data is retained whether you like it or not, and they have policies and you could sue them and there's liability. But if it's super private and secret, I wouldn't trust them. One thing you can do is use public and private cloud. So Azure, Amazon, Google Cloud, all these providers have many different modes where you can run the AI in their cloud, but it's your private cloud on their cloud. This gets complicated, but you can have machines that can't talk to anyone else, but they live in an Azure data center. That's your private cloud in the public cloud infrastructure. And your machines in your IT department or your desktop machine will talk securely with those machines, but they can't talk outside. So it's like having a virtual private lab in infrastructure. There's also more extremes. You can have on-premise private clouds where you just have a bunch of machines across the hall or your own data center, and you can use some of that public infrastructure code to do the hosting and management of the machines, but they all run on your machines, your hardware, your network, and your building. But they'll run that. So the AIs can run in both those environments, and your desktop machine at home or your laptop at home or your desktop at work can connect and tunnel into those and use those AIs. That's a common way that most enterprises are using machine learning and AI, particularly LLMs today. There's another version which is even more extreme, which is self-hosting. This is technically a way to get around your IT department or going down the road of forgiveness first permission. But you can download Ollama, and there's a Hugging Face. Ollama is the easiest. You just download an app, install it, launch it, and you do one command line to say, I want open source model you want. It will download it and host it. And importantly, it hosts it two ways. One, there's a UI that looks like ChatGPT. So whatever you're familiar with, it works. Also, it has an API. You can have a locally hosted API, so you can program against it. These models will not just work on your local machine, they'll even work offline. So if airplane mode's on, Wi-Fi is turned off, you can still run these things. So for some applications, you need that, but it's only as private and secure as the data on your machine. So still do be careful, but you can go to that extreme of just self-hosting, open source. The data doesn't go off your machine, and that's about as good as you can get. AI had a perception of being expensive early on, and it was kind of true. It'll cost cents per request, but they add up quickly. You have to make a lot of calls or a lot of chats. But these costs have dropped over 95% in the last 18 months. It's pretty dramatic. Today, all the providers are trying to go to a model where they want it to be free, right? Like air. So they want you to depend on them more than you want your pennies adding up. They want a lifelong customer. So making this stuff as cheap as possible. Again, if you download your own models and host them locally, it's as free as the CPU and the power that you're using in your machine. So that's pretty inexpensive. And there's free versions of almost all of these AIs and LMs on the cloud. Even if you pay for them, it's embarrassingly inexpensive. For $20, $30 a month, you have like an AI assistant that can code for you and write tests and generate tests and find bugs. That's the cheapest software tester in the world, and it's your assistant if you use it. If you don't use it, you'll be spending 10 hours a week doing something that $30 could have solved for you, or even less than $10 a week. A coffee, price of a coffee can accelerate your career prospects or hinder them if you want to be cheap. Cost should not be an issue. An interesting topic that's kind of meta that generally scares people. It's not as concerning as privacy and security issues are, but it's who owns this data. There's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the fact that the AIs have crawled all these images and all these articles. And, when they reproduce something, it's based on something it's read. So who owns that? Is that copyright infringement? Is that plagiarism? To be clear, it's not decided in the courts, and it probably won't be for a little while. The cloud providers, the frontier model people, know this is an issue, and it blocks adoption. But there's a couple reasons you shouldn't worry about these issues. One is that, again, they've got billions in the bank. I don't know if you've heard about this, but they have billions in the bank with a B, and they have a few lawyers. And if you look up their policies, you'll notice they indemnify you. So basically, they say that if you get sued, they will defend you, and they even pay damages and everything. So if you do something and is later determined to be not cool or polite or correct, they'll cover your legal fees and defend you. If you ask it to reproduce a Monet, like the lilies, and it does a really good job of an exact reproduction, maybe that's an issue. But if you think about it, guess what? People don't realize this. What does Google do? You search for something on Google, this is already a problem today on the web. But specifically, even Google will take the text of pages and use them in their snippet. What is a Google search result page? Like the title and the text for each response are from third-party websites. My point is that this is already done, and this is already solved case law. Google's won in the courts. Most people don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and don't take this as legal advice officially or financial advice, but they've argued and won the case. What they do is the interesting part of the text and title out of a page, and then putting them together in a mixed format of different websites. That constitutes a new work of art, essentially. And the fact that the news organizations are unhappy, kind of buy them off and pay them off. And you see OpenAI doing the same. But it's not really an issue. It's already solved case law. Just people aren't used to it happening with generative AI. So I wouldn't worry about this at all. Ultimately, you should follow your IT and company's policies. A, I have to say that. And B, generally speaking, I wouldn't worry about it. If you're not using AI today because you have concerns about legal, privacy, security, all that stuff about AI, it's probably not clever. AI is transforming our industry, particularly software testing. And I wouldn't let these concerns destroy my career or skip my next promotion because I'm just waiting because I'm worried about these things that will probably be solved anyway or have already been solved. Good luck using LLMs in your life and your career and being smart and not being threatened by it and adopting it early. You've got to jump on this train or it's going to leave the station and you won't be able to catch up. Now's the time to figure out how to use AI and LMs. If you can't, if you really have issues or concerns or can't figure it out, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever, and I can try to help use AI and be awesome and help it test your products. And actually, sometimes I really pay attention. AI will make software better. Testers complain about software all the time, but AI will help us make a better world through higher quality software, more reliable software, and better design software. So please use it.